Well, friends, when I talked to Reverend Tom about what I was going to do for this sermon, my first one for all of you, I said to him half-jokingly that maybe I just read the full story, 13 chapters in all, and just leave it at that. And he laughed and I laughed because we both knew I was going to have to write a real sermon, but part of me wasn't kidding. Because it's a really good story. It's a really good story if you know what it's like to have your family life feel a bit like a mess. I mean, this story has it all. There's anxiety and favoritism, sibling rivalry, betrayal, and it's all coming to a head in the life of Joseph, but this has really been brewing for many generations who keep repeating the same mistakes. This story has good news for you too if you are a queer person. I'm not saying that anyone can actually tell you Joseph was queer, but I can tell you that there's rabbis who say he traded souls with his sister in the womb, and that there's other translations of the piece of clothing he had that call it a princess dress and not a long robe. So if you can relate to feeling ostracized because of your identity or how you look, there's good news for you. There's good news for you if you feel like your life is just a bunch of chaos and you don't know how to stop the cycle. If you've ever felt alone, if you've ever felt betrayed, or if you've ever been the one doing the betraying. Because this story, like many of our real messy lives, is full of ups and downs. And these are pretty extreme ups and downs. Joseph starts as a favored child, and then he's almost killed and sold into slavery. He becomes a successful man, but he's falsely accused of a crime and gets thrown into prison. But eventually, somehow, he becomes the right-hand man of the Pharaoh. A job which not only has its personal perks for him, but allows him to save the lives of many, many people. Now, I could focus on any part of this really compelling, topsy-turvy story arc, but I want to hone in on that last bit. How does Joseph go from prison to palace, from dungeon to the one running the kingdom in Egypt? Well, it has to do with his dreaming. His God-given ability to know something about the future. And I think this is important because while Joseph's sufferings are not his fault, if he's like me or many of us humans, then when he was thinking back about how did I get into this mess, he probably asked himself, is there something I could have done differently? Or is there something I could change about myself to stop this from happening again? And if he asked that, he may well have landed on the dreaming. That's part of why his brothers hated him, right? That they didn't like this dream that he had where he said he was going to be in charge of him. And that's maybe the one bit of this where we could have offered some correction for Joseph of, if your brothers already don't like you, maybe don't tell them that you think you're going to be in charge of them someday. Again, not his fault that they sold him into slavery, but as he reflected, he could have decided to give up the dreaming altogether. But he doesn't. He, in fact, leans into the dreaming, because not only is he having his own dreams, but he starts to interpret the dreams of other people. He does this first in jail, and then years later, when Pharaoh has dreams that no one can explain. Because Joseph has now a little reputation, someone says, I know a guy who can help out. And Joseph comes in, and he says, your dream means that you're going to have 7 years of prosperity, followed by 7 years of famine. But he actually doesn't even stop there. He offers a plan. Now, again, we didn't read it today because we didn't read the full 13 chapters of this story. But Joseph says, because you're going to have these years of prosperity followed by famine, this is what you need to do. You need to prepare now, store up grain now, so that the whole kingdom will be okay. He has leaned into his God-given gift, from having his own dreams to interpreting others to figuring out how to best prepare for the future for the good of the world. And he does it so well that when this famine goes regional and his brothers back at home are hungry, they come to Egypt looking for grain. And what happens then tells us what can happen when we let grace into our lives. Now, I say what can happen because it's not necessarily what will happen. Life is messy. Life doesn't come with guarantees of reconciliation, of hugs, of we've all forgiven one another. But we have to let grace in for this to even be a possibility. Because if we close ourselves off to the possibility of transformation, then we guarantee that nothing changes. And what winds up happening in this story is that Joseph's brothers come in, and Joseph first tests them before revealing himself. Again, we didn't get into it earlier, but I think you should know. He creates a scenario where the brothers could have thrown the youngest one under the bus. But they decide not to do it this time, because they've reflected on how much harm they caused Joseph, on how much that hurt their father, and they decide we're not going to do it again. They decide that they're done causing that kind of harm. They are transformed into more loving people. And Joseph, in part because of his up and down experience, and probably in part because he sees his brothers have changed, his response is transformed as well. Joseph is a transformed person not because he has totally changed himself, but because he's leaned into who God made him. He's been filled with grace along the way, become maybe a little bit more mature, because now his brothers are literally bowing down before him, and he doesn't throw it in their face like he might have when he was a young kid. And he recognizes that what he went through enables him to help transform the world. My friends, when we suffer, we often ask why. Sometimes we can answer that question. It's because I did something wrong, or because someone else did something wrong. And similarly, when we see people around us suffering, we might be able to pinpoint the reason. And other times we can't. Other times there's just no good explanation for why this is happening. We can say, I didn't deserve it. They didn't deserve it. But we still have to figure out where to pick up and go next. And what this story teaches us is that through our suffering, as undeserved as it may be, and as hard as it may be for us to understand, can put us into a place where we have the ability to transform not only our own lives, but the lives of many people, to bring more life into the world, to bring more love into the world, because we know what it's like to hurt, and so we don't want to hurt anyone else. We don't want to let anyone else get hurt by anyone else. That's what it means to lean into love. To say that because of what I have gone through, I know the importance of being the best version of who God made me to be, to transform the world. When we suffer, when we see suffering, may it be so with us. Amen.